Hello everyone and welcome to yet another commentary track for Judge of Character, this one being for episode 26, The Terminator. As always, I'm Steve, and let's get the show on the road. So the best place to start is this whole opening with the title card saying that I got cut from Blip. Yes, that really happened. That was a case of real life writes the plot. On the date I mentioned in the title card, Blip went through this massive purge and cut a whole bunch of shows, not just my own, but a bunch of others too, including a couple of people from Channel Awesome, although from what I understand they later got their shows reinstated. But point being, they cut a lot of different shows, and unfortunately mine was one of the many casualties. So if you've been keeping up with the show and me on Twitter, you'll know that I've been taking the last couple weeks to sort of revamp my old YouTube page and get it ready for posting pretty much just Judge of Character stuff. But that's all been taken care of, so after this I'll be going back to my regularly scheduled content, and my god, you can see my pooch. My fat little stomach there. Yeah, isn't that just sexy? I was actually losing weight for a little while there, but unfortunately I kind of fell off the bandwagon. But anyway, yeah, because of the Blip purge, the video... I'm never happy. The video had to change quite a bit, actually. The original idea was there was not going to be any sort of opening. It was just going to go straight to the opening sequence here, and then the episode regular. And then the ending, of course, was also completely different. But thanks to Blip and their stupidity, I had to go back and make a few changes, which actually ended up being for the better, because personally I thought it made the episode come out just a little bit better. So yeah, this episode is talking about the Terminator, and typically when I look at a character to talk about for the show, there's generally a couple things I try to look at, everything from what kind of an effect that the character had on popular culture, or maybe they've just been around for a long time. There's a lot of things that I look at, and then every so often I come across a character that at first I think has a lot to talk about, and then sometimes they don't. Yeah, this whole sequence here, it is the truth though. If you hear the name Arnold Schwarzenegger, your first thought is usually either explosions or really bad one-liners. But the Terminator was actually a case where at first glance I thought I was going to have a lot to talk about, and then as I started writing down my notes, it didn't seem like I was going to have a lot, and then it turned... Oh god, this line. Yeah, that's about the reaction I had, for real. But yeah, as I was writing the notes, I was beginning to think I wasn't going to have a lot to talk about, and then it turned around as I was filming, and it was like, wow, I really do actually have a... Oh god. I'm sorry if I keep getting interrupted, but it's just... This movie... And that face... Just no. But, yeah, as I was filming, I ended up having a lot more to talk about than I even thought was possible. And it really is the truth. The Terminator really is one of those great characters that we don't talk about him that much. I mean, he's there in our public conscious, in pop culture and everything, but unless you're a really hardcore dedicated fan of like science fiction and what have you, you're not really going to sit there and analyze the character. You're just going to sit there and be like, oh yeah, he's cool, but you don't really stop to think about why. But really, truly, the Terminator did have a major impact on science fiction and action films in general. Come to think of it, I don't recall any movie or book or anything that had the plot of a machine going back in time to kill somebody, at least not in the way that this movie did. If there is, by all means let me know. I'd love to hear it, because as far as I know, this was the first to do it. And yes, that is another obvious parallel. There is the virgin birth and what have you, giving birth to the savior of mankind. And that is stage blood, by the way. I've had that for a while, and I've actually been trying to find a lot of other places to use it, but unfortunately when I write my jokes, I don't often come up with a good reason to use the stage blood, except for here and in the ending here. And this was the only time, and this was the only shot I had where I could flub a line and I wouldn't have to worry about going back and reshooting it, because I could play like I forgot, because I just had my head bashed in.
Starring a then unknown Arnie and directed by a young James Cameron before he got his
Yeah, before he got his reputation as being something of a hard ass. I obviously have never met James Cameron. I don't know if he's that much of an asshole or not, but one thing I cannot deny is that he does make some damn good movies. Uh, there's a reason I watched Titanic numerous times.
So basically, what I'm wondering is if Peter Piper did take a peck of pickle.
One thing I kind of want to talk about, and you can see a little bit of it here, but you can definitely see most of it in the revised ending we went back and shot for the video. This is a good use of what's known as color correction, or rather color grading. Ever since I got my camera, which is a Nikon D5100, I've gotten far more into what is known as color grading, which is where you take your footage and you change the overall color of it to create a specific sort of tone or temperature. If you listen to some people who make videos or just even photographers, they'll talk sometimes about how a shot is warm or a shot is cold. That's what they're talking about, is where the color of the shot, whether it be film or picture, has that certain color tone to it. I first started using color correction because with my normal setup here where I'm in the chair, the lights I had when I first got the camera made it kind of problematic because a lot of times there was still quite a bit of noise left over. And in fact, if you look, you can still see some of that here. Then I upgraded to a better lighting rig, which actually had worse bulbs, and that actually made the problem worse. And then, of course, I upgraded to bigger bulbs that give a lot brighter light, but again, there's still some noise. So I use color correction on these shots where I'm sitting in the chair to make it look a little bit better and to kind of bring out the colors. And in case you're wondering, that's me voicing Skynet just with heavily filtered effects. And admittedly, I could have done a little better on the picture there. In fact, as I was sitting there, I was like, could I animate this in some way, like give it a pulsing light or something? But I got kind of lazy, so yeah, I apologize for that. I could have done better, but you can't do everything at your best all the time, even if you try. I could have done these pictures a little better, made them not quite as opaque, but I'm sorry. I tend to get on. I tend to be my worst critic about my own videos, so. This is quickly becoming a running gag in my show where something strange happens and it's pointed out. It's like, aren't you concerned or worried about this sort of event happening? And my response is just, no, I don't care. It's like, I live in Florida. All sorts of weird shit happens here. I don't care. It doesn't faze me anymore. Which the funny thing is I do live in Florida, but I don't actually... I guess it's because of where I live. I get spared some of the crazier stuff that happens around here. I haven't actually run into anyone that's been running around naked and crazy. Had a close call with someone high on drugs, but that's a story for another day. That's a fact that actually surprised me, was that this franchise was bigger than the Indiana Jones franchise. I kind of thought it would be the other way around, but then again, you look at it, and it actually does make sense. The Terminator movies ended up turning more of a profit and have just been around for a lot longer. Whether that's a good thing, that's debatable, but you know. The endoskeleton. That is easily one of the more iconic images, not only from this franchise, but in sci-fi in general. When you think of killer robots, that's usually what you think of, is the endoskeleton from Terminator. And usually whenever there's a robot involved, they have some sort of reference or shout out to the Terminator endoskeleton, even if it's just in how the design is. Fun fact for you trivia hounds out there, if you notice between the first and the second movie, Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, he's a lot shinier in the first movie. He's got a lot more sweat. And there's actually supposedly a technical reason for that. According to from what I've heard, there's an in-universe explanation that says, you know, it's living flesh, but it's around a machine that's running hot all the time, so it's basically starting to rot and decay, and that creates the unnatural sheen to it, which actually does create a good effect. And that's also another point that you could put in favor of how the Terminator from the first. Oh god. I know I pick on Twilight a lot, but can you blame me? Honestly, it's such a low-hanging fruit. But the shininess, so to speak, of Arnold's Terminator from the first movie and the lack of that shininess from the Terminator in the second movie, that's something you could also compare between the two. You know, the shininess and how he starts to kind of decay a little bit, makes him a little bit more imposing, I guess would be the word, or just unnatural. And therefore a little bit more villainous. And then in the second movie, when he's the heroic Terminator, it's not present. He actually looks more like a human being. Ironically, is that irony? I don't know. I'd like to understand. I'd like to find out why there was a change in the design between the Terminators in the first and second movie. You know, because here he's got that flat top, and in the first one he didn't. It's like, did Skynet decide it was just needed to change? Do Terminators have a salon in the future? Is that a thing? I don't know. That's not my ringtone, obviously.
What?
I don't really think I needed to explain that, but...
Because it's a shitty franchise with shitty characters. Now stop calling me!
Now, to point out, I am not... Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of Twilight, but I don't hate it for the same reasons that a lot of other people hate it. I'm not being a typical guy who doesn't like romance stories. In fact, I am pretty much the opposite. I'm a hopeless romantic. I believe in true love and all that jazz. It's just, the Twilight franchise to me completely screwed over any chance of being a good franchise it had. Just because of the characters and how they're characterized, for lack of a better term. I mean, that's the thing that killed it for me. It had such a potential to be a good franchise, but they screwed it up. But enough ranting about Twilight. That's not what we're here to talk about. Not entirely sure what we're here to... Oh, God.
As far as I'm concerned, that never happened.
The funny thing is Mr. Freeze... I don't have one particular character that's my absolute favorite above all else. The closest one you could argue as having the top spot for me is Mr. Freeze, and the thing about Mr. Freeze, or at least that particular version that Arnold Schwarzenegger played, as bad as that role was, it honestly could have been a lot worse. And he did an okay job. It's just the one-liners. Oh God, the one-liners. And speak of the devil.
Stick around. You should clone yourself.
I just went down a list of some of the more well-known one-liners and just grabbed clips of them and like, yeah, this sums up Arnold in the 90s.
Let off some steam, Bennett.
What happened to Baza?
God, these lines.
He had to split.
So who are you, man? Shit!
That one right there is actually my favorite one. Is I'm the potty pooper. I don't know why. It's no funnier than any of the others, but I like it for some reason.
Regardless of whether or not
It's stupid, but it's funny.
Even if it makes sense. But of course, the one-liner we all know and love from him.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's actually I'll be back.
Actually, he does say it as I'll be back in the movie. It's just over time, the public, pop culture, we've said it as Bach, but it really is back. He does actually pronounce it correctly, even through his thick accent. And God, those shades! How is that ever a fashionable thing? Somebody tell me.
So moments like this,
Fuck you, asshole.
while funny afterwards, at that moment only to serve to remind us of what the character.
And it's true, that is a funny moment in the movie, but it further highlights just how creepy the Terminator is. I mean, really, this footage. Yeah. I admit I used to be like that. I used to be one of the... I didn't get on the microphone and like say shit like that, but I was one of the more aggressive Call of Duty players, and then as time went on, I got tired of it. I was like, no, we're done. But what I was saying earlier about color grading and color correction, because I'm pretty sure I went off the trend on that one. Color grading is where you take the footage and you give it a particular tone of color, and this right here is a great example of it. Terminator 2 and The Matrix are probably the two better examples of color grading and what kind of effect they have on them. In Terminator 2, if you notice, most of the shots, like in the insane asylum and later on in various other parts, the movie tends to have this sort of bluer tint. Even here right now, you can see the midtones of the footage have this sort of blue tint to them. And what that does in the film is that actually creates this sort of subconscious effect. It gives you this feeling of metal, of steel, of just something inorganic, which works for a character like the Terminator. You know, these two machines. So it creates a nice tone, and that's actually something I try to mimic later in the video when I'm doing the big ending. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, because I was trying to emulate the Terminator films, specifically Terminator 2. But The Matrix is another good example of it, because in that movie, whenever they're in the little smiley face. Sorry, ladies, I'm sure some of you wanted to see Schwarzenegger's ass, but I'm not particularly a fan, so sorry. But yeah, in The Matrix, whenever the characters are actually in The Matrix, if you notice, the movie takes on a green tint to it, and that's to sort of subconsciously denote, like, hey, we're in a computer program right now. So I'm not a good actor, I'm not gonna lie, but I think I do well for what I do with myself.
Aren't you supposed to be doing that anyway?
Get your minds out the gutter. So yeah, the ending of this, the original ending I had in mind before the blip fuck up was instead of sending a Terminator back like it's done in other movies and like it ends up doing here, it was going to remote control my toaster, which I don't actually have. It was just going to be a random toaster, and the toaster was going to attack me. And the ending was going to be a shot of me running down the street, screaming my head off, arms in the air, being chased by a flying toaster that's spitting fireballs. And you would see Jay on the porch with his tablet, and you can hear him playing Flappy Bird because you can hear the sound effects. And he'd see me run by, and he'd just kind of stand, or he'd sit and stare, and all of a sudden the game would be, he'd lose because the game would hit a pipe or something, and he'd go inside like cussing, like, God damn son of a bitch! But after Blip and all the shit it did, and more example of color grading here, after all the shit Blip put me through, I went and redid the ending, and it actually ended up being for the better. But yeah, those two shots back and forth, the Foundry here and the shot with Sarah Connor, those are other real good examples of color grading. Because again, at that moment, Sarah is at her most like a Terminator. You know, she's got the gun in her hand, she's about to kill Dyson, and in that scene, you know, the shot has that blue tinting to it. That again, that machinery sort of tint. And then in the Foundry, it's got the more warm tones, and mainly that's to reflect the fact that they're surrounded by molten steel, but also the fact that the Terminator at that point has become his most human. So yeah, as far as the Terminator and action scenes, that's that's something you have to mention more out of just obligation than anything else. We all know that the Terminator is a big action character. We all know he's, you know, just another action-based character that Arnold Schwarzenegger has played. But there's more to the character than that. But I felt like I had to mention it because it's like, if I don't, someone would call me out on it. Someone get on the internet, it's like, but you didn't mention anything about the action sequences. Well, I kind of thought that was obvious.
Talk to you later.
Poor Jay, my long-suffering friend and neighbor, getting caught up in my wacky
Now, I keep
antics.
bringing up Arnold Schwarzenegger and all this, but how important is he in regards to the character? Very important.
Yeah, a lot of people like to make fun of Schwarzenegger's acting. They like to make fun of his acting, how wooden it is, or rather how robotic it is. And yeah, he's not the greatest actor in the world. I'm not gonna pin him as the kind of guy who's gonna do like Hamlet, even though they made fun of that in Last Action Hero. But he does a very good job here. He conveys that killer robot feel. That, oh Jesus, how do I keep using that clip?
And there goes my nightmares for the week.
He really does get across that machine-like mentality and behavior, and that's what's important, is is how you can convey that character. Now, whether or not he actually got past that, that's up for debate. But I think he did a good enough job. And more naked Schwarzenegger. Thankfully, I didn't have to really censor this one because you don't see that much.
It's also a character that best proves the ability of humanity to keep fighting, no matter the odds.
One thing I've always wondered, though, you know, if you notice back in that shot, the concrete's gotten all red hot, and yet apparently it doesn't damage his toes. So yeah, this is where the ending was changed. In the upcoming shot where I turned my head and I looked to the side, that was originally supposed to be like a fireball going off, and I was going to say, well, it appears that my toaster has come to life and is trying to kill me, and I, you know, sign off with my line, but we decided to go back and shoot a whole bunch of additional footage, and we just cut there, and that's where it leads into the next bit. So the Terminator here is played by my friend Michaela Richards, who does a fantastic job. And I gotta admit, when I first approached her for this little bit part, I wasn't sure how it was gonna go, because out of all of me and my group of friends, I'm probably the best actor. And I'm not saying that to, you know, toot my own horn or you know, show off or anything like that. It's just I've been doing this for a year, so I just happen to have a little bit more experience in it. But Michaela did a very fantastic job. She followed the directions very well. She gave me a lot of ideas that I hadn't even considered before. She was very much into this. I was very surprised. So she did a fantastic job, and I definitely intend to use her more often as much as I can. But this is, again, more examples of color grading. That shot could have been done a little better, but you know, do what you can. Yeah, if you were to see the raw footage for all this, it is not as blue. It's actually very bright, kind of yellow. But I went back and that comedic sound effect. I went back and I pushed up the blues of each shot to give it that sort of a similar tone to the Terminator 2. Because that's what I was going for, was to make it seem like the movie. You can see a little bit more of the blood there. We weren't trying to shoot anything complicated. We were just trying to make it a funny little joke. And honestly, I don't know how she was able to do any acting. Oh god, this is my favorite scene just because the sound her hand makes when she hits my throat. That was not added in later. That happened right there in the shot. She hit my throat and I was just like, Hut! But I honestly don't know how she managed to do this in that heat. And that was a digital effect shot. If you look, you can see just barely kind of the outline of the, not of the green screen, but you can see where it's kind of clipping with the background. And that was actually a really cool shot. We just had Michaela standing out in the road in front of a green screen that was being held up by my friends Jay and Chris. Had her walk forward and then act like she got hit by a car, and then I had another shot, same location, same setup, where the car came in, and I just digitally composed them together, and it created a great effect. That's the Terminator M. I couldn't think of anything snappy to come up with. But yeah, that is episode 26 of the Terminator. Obviously, the rest of the show is going to be on YouTube. I highly doubt it's ever gonna come back to Blip unless I were to magically get picked up by Channel Awesome. I don't think that's gonna happen, but yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed the commentary. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at Steve the Wicked and wickedsmile88.tumblr.com. And that was the Wicked Smile. Later.